Welcome back, guys, to our channel for another episode with Diabetes 180. We are going to discuss something that you probably heard is beneficial for diabetes, weight loss. That's I can't talk today. Apple cider vinegar, right? Apple cider vinegar. Is it something that we can use safely? And how effective is it for blood sugar control, for diabetes management, right? So as always, we want to make sure these channels, these lives are accessible, and so that you can join us in the conversation, ask questions on the topic at hand or on diabetes in general. Okay, so if you're watching for the first time, please let us know in the chat room. We always love to greet our visitors, and if you've been watching for a while, definitely let us know in the chat room so we can greet you and welcome you back. Thank you so much for joining us every Monday at 7 p.m. So one other thing too, at the end of our channel, we always give opportunity to join our group membership program. We actually have an exciting competition, I could call it, challenge that's for the new year. How many of you guys think you can go 30 days with no junk food? All right, so that's the challenge. Junk the junk food, all right, in January. And as a prize, one of those who are successful in junking junk food for 30 days will get $150, right? So you get to start the new year with a little bonus, right? To recover from your Christmas spending as a reward for being successful in something that's very hard to do, junking junk food. This is one of the challenges we have periodically in our membership program. You do have to be a member in our Diabetes 180 community to join the challenge. So make sure you visit either the description section of our videos. I'm not sure if we have the link on this specific video, so you might have to go back to previous videos where we have the shareable link for the community membership. Or of course, check the bio section. The bio section of if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Or I believe maybe on TikTok, we might be broadcasting there too. Check the bio section for links to like our membership. But on to the topic at hand. How many of you guys are using apple cider vinegar? Is it something that you use when you're, as far as drinking it? How are you using it? Are you diluting it in water? Are you adding it to dressing? So what we're going to talk about today is number one is it effective? So I want to know if anyone's watching has had good results with apple cider vinegar. If you can say that, yeah, I've taken it and it works, then let us know. That'd be awesome, so we could share that with others who are watching on your success. We're going to talk about studies that prove its effectiveness, what to really expect as far as blood sugar control, and if there's any other benefits that come with it. One of the biggest things people talk about is weight loss. How much weight can you lose with apple cider vinegar? How much does it take? Right. And then lastly, we want to talk about how safe it is, right? What's a safe way to include vinegar into your body? And of course, what I always like to do is talk about the science, the biochemistry. Why does it work? Why is it effective, right? What makes it work? Is it the apples? Is it the vinegar? What is it? What makes apple cider vinegar effective if it truly is effective? All right. So those are the things we're going to cover very quickly. All right. So like I said, this is a live for a reason. So you could ask questions and we could, field your questions and give you the appropriate answers. If not now, later. Right. So let's jump right in. So is apple cider vinegar helpful for diabetes? Well, luckily we have a lot of studies that back it up. Okay, so there are many studies that have been that are out there. Researchers have proven it is effective for blood sugar control. It is something that anyone with diabetes should consider, especially if they're looking for natural additions to medications, natural medications, right? So that you can improve your blood sugar levels in a natural way. Apple cider vinegar is something you should definitely consider, because of its effectiveness. But how effective can it be? Let's look at this. So, hello, Betty. Thanks for joining in. All right. Uh, It's Snickers. Oh yeah, Snickers is considered junk food. That's for sure. I think we know what junk food is, but we can have the discussion if anyone's confused, right? Anything that doesn't add to your nutrition is junk food, right? And so thanks for asking that. If hopefully you can join our challenge and eliminate junk food in January. But let's go ahead and talk about apple cider vinegar and its effectiveness to lower blood sugar levels. So in this meta-analysis of clinical trials, they put together a participant study amount of 1,320 adults, right, in total, and studied the effectiveness of adding apple cider vinegar along with, of course, whatever medications they're using for blood sugar control. And there were good results. So there were significant improvements in fasting blood sugar levels. So I used talking about a drop of on average about 20 points fasting blood sugar levels. That's pretty good. That means if you're, let's say, routinely over 100, maybe you're at 120, you could get possibly down to the double digits, with apple cider vinegar. And A1C drop was also pretty good, looking at a drop of a little less than 1% in A1C levels with apple cider vinegar. Okay, so there are clinical trials that show that apple cider vinegar can be an effective addition to a healthy lifestyle, of course, and any medications you're taking for your blood sugar levels. Definitely not at the point of reversing. That's what we're all about in Diabetes 180. You reverse that? Obviously dropping A1C by 1 point isn't really going to reverse, right? Your diabetes, seeing a modest 10 to 20 drop in your blood sugar levels isn't going to reverse your diabetes. But we're talking about a cheap intervention here, right? A couple cents a day, to improve your blood sugar levels. Definitely worth using in treating, your blood sugar levels. So think about this. Is it the apples? Is it the vinegar? What really makes it work, right? So I always like to talk about the mechanisms of these things, why they work. So apple cider vinegar is essentially basically fermented apples, right? Apples turn into alcohol, which then goes into another production process, right? Where they add yeast to break down that alcohol, or special bacteria, I should not yeast, sorry, special bacteria, specialized bacteria that breaks down the alcohol, the result of apple fermentation, and turns it into acetic acid. So it's the acetic acid which is the main component, the main ingredient of what makes it beneficial. The acetic acid, when digested, has a lot of health benefits. And that's good to know because that means that you don't need to only rely on apple cider vinegar. Any vinegar has acetic acid as its key component. So basically, vinegar is diluted acetic acid, right? So if you're talking about balsamic vinegar or rice vinegar or trying to think of other vinegars there are out there. Whatever vinegar you're using, there's a lot of exotic vinegar dressings you can use to spice up or spruce up your salads. You're going to get the same effect because they all have acetic acid in them, right? Diluted acetic acid is essentially what vinegar is. And so how it works is pretty interesting. It used to be thought that acetic acid helps to lower blood sugar levels because it slows digestive emptying, right? It slows the movement of food through your digestive tract. That's because when you have something acidic, right, it builds up the acidity in the first part of your intestines, which signals the rest of your intestines to slow down because it has to now buffer this acid load. But this is actually what isn't really, when you look to it and put it to the test, it's not really what's really benefiting you. So when they actually do an ultrasound and kind of see how much food is left with or without acid, how fast food moves through your digestive tract, it doesn't have a very strong effect. So that's not really where it's working. It also has been thought that acetic acid can block starch digestion, right? Because it blocks the enzyme that munches and breaks down carbs present in a meal. So it's often been thought that that's why it's working. But when you further investigate this doesn't seem to be really the reason why blood sugars are improving. Because when they check at how much carbs are broken down into glucose and entering into the blood, it's about the same with or without vinegar when you test it, right? As far as the speed in which it enters your bloodstream, it's about the same. right? So if it's not slowing your digestive tract, that's working to lower your blood sugar levels. If it's not the starch blocking effect that's causing this improvement in blood sugar levels, what is it, right? I don't know if anyone has any guess, but we've actually talked about this before. It's this AMPK, the enzyme that is the energy switch, the energy control center of our body. Right? Does anyone remember us talking about AMPK? This is not the first in our channel with this term. This enzyme has come up, so it's very interesting that this pathway, this enzyme pathway, is often the mechanism in which a lot of these foods, like berberine, we talked about last week, and acetic acid or vinegar this week, can be effective. Hello, Lo Henry. Thanks for joining us. So, thinking now about this, right? AMPK being that common pathway along the lines of many other different herbs, foods, supplements we've talked about in the past. It makes sense that would be the mechanism in which vinegar can be beneficial for our blood sugar levels, which means it's also maybe good for burning fat. Because if you remember, what does AMPK do? AMPK basically is activated whenever there's a sense of a drop in energy in a cell. When the cells detect that there's a drop or a dip in energy levels, it switches on AMPK. It's like saying, okay, we need to start burning fat, not storing it, right? We need to start recruiting blood sugar out of the blood and put it into the cells where they belong, right? We need to start becoming more sensitive to insulin so we can get that food energy right from wherever it's stored or wherever it's coming in, and make sure that it gets to the right place, right, inside our cells where it can be burned for energy. So it puts us in energy production mode, meaning you're going to be lots more sensitive to insulin, which makes you more tolerant of carbs that you're eating, right? You want to have ways and methods of activating AMPK as much as possible. Okay. So it just makes sense then. This is the mechanism which vinegar becomes effective in turning on this switch. And if you want to get a little more nerdy with it, basically what's happening is whenever you take in acetic acid, it has to be broken down, right? And turned into energy. This is a very energy expensive process. So the process in which a cell has to take the byproduct of acetic acid and turn it into energy, it's expensive, right? Energy wise. So this causes the cell to sense a drop in energy levels and then turning on AMPK whenever it has to digest and metabolize vinegar, right? So it's definitely something I would recommend any of us who are looking for benefits when it comes to blood sugar. But let's talk about other benefits of this vinegar, right? And so this is actually a good example of what you can expect. Not a huge difference, but if you ate bread without, just bread without anything on it, your blood sugar might rise. So this is millimoles per liter, but it might rise to, let's say, for example, 135, 140, right? Um, if you added vinegar to it, instead of going up to 140, it might drop down to about 130 or maybe a little bit 126, right? So there's going to be a little improvement, as far as blunting the rise in blood sugar levels. If you consume any food that is carb rich, specifically refined carbs, right? It works more with refined carbs. When you add vinegar to the consumption of refined carbs, you can blunt the spike in blood sugar levels. Even though it's modest, it's still significant. And again, it's a cheap intervention, right? It doesn't cost. And it's actually interesting because that effect, even though if it's like a 10 to 20 point difference, that's better than some medications. There are some medications that boast maybe a 10 to 15 to 20 point drop in as far as blunting your blood sugar spike after a meal, and comes with 20 side effects, right? Vinegar, not many side effects, right? We're going to talk about at the end maybe how its affects our teeth and enamel and how we can prevent that, but pretty safe, right? Pretty cheap. Even though the effect is modest, why not try it, right? Why not add it to our daily regimen? So there's also other benefits. This is in studies with people at risk of diabetes. They noticed that adding vinegar, and this is from all sources. I think this might be from balsamic vinegar, so not necessarily only apple cider vinegar again, but you can see an improvement in triglycerides, right? So less triglycerides floating in the blood after a meal, less insulin in the blood after a meal. So basically decreasing the elevation that naturally comes when we eat food, right? And this is good because elevated triglycerides, elevated insulin levels in the blood is directly correlated to heart disease. The heart disease is the number one cause of death worldwide of diabetics and non-diabetics. However, being diabetic, you're at very high risk of heart disease. So this is very good, right? So apple cider vinegar can improve our cholesterol levels, improve our insulin levels, along with improving our blood sugar. So something we can definitely recommend. What about people again who are at risk for diabetes? This was a study that dropped fasting blood plasma glucose levels by a modest 16 milligrams per deciliter in just 1 week, right? And it was 1 tablespoon twice a day. Again, the effect that you would see with medications probably and without the side effects, right? So you can see a modest drop in blood sugar levels with the addition of just tablespoons a day of vinegar to the diet, right? So I don't know if this is news to anybody. So far, I haven't heard anyone's using it. So that's pretty interesting. I think a lot of people do use apple cider vinegar. So something that we can get anywhere at your local grocery store. So what about other studies on diabetes specifically? So this is an 8-week study where diabetics were given either 2 tablespoons twice a day of apple cider vinegar or half a tablespoon of dill pickles. That's basically, I'm sorry, the equivalent of half a tablespoon of vinegar in the form of dill pickles. So I can't remember how much dill pickles they had to eat, or if it was a juice or at all that they were drinking, but the equivalent to what's about half a tablespoon of vinegar. And then I guess another group of a very, very small amount of vinegar, basically 1/16 of a teaspoon, right, in a day. And they tested for 8 weeks to see what would happen to blood sugar levels. And without surprise, the 1/16th group and the half a tablespoon didn't see much results as far as their blood sugar improvement, but the 2 tablespoon twice a day group had an A1C drop of 0.16%, right? So a modest drop again, but still significant, right? 0.16% for again pennies a day, something small amount, something cheap and without side effects. So what about weight loss? So the weight loss is interesting because most people hear about the benefits of apple cider vinegar for weight loss. At least that's why I've heard it for used for. So is it effective, right? Can it help with weight loss? When you look at the studies, at first you may think, well, the effect is modest. I mean, you look at how much they lose as far as weight, you may not really think it's worth it, right? But I want to reconsider this by looking at this one study, right? This was a really interesting study that was done with in Japan. Now, what's interesting too about this study is they did it with Japanese subjects who were considered overweight or obese, right? And obese in Japan at the time of the study is anyone above 25 BMI. Where in America, you're not considered obese until you're about 30 BMI, right? So you're talking about people from maybe 25 to 27 BMI, right? Which is considered overweight, but not obese in America, but obese in Japan. So they took 150 people, considered overweight by our standards, and they put them in 3 doses of vinegar. So they had one group taking 1 tablespoon of vinegar, another group taking 2 tablespoons of vinegar daily, and another taking a placebo that tasted acidic but wasn't actually any vinegar in it, right? And what happened in this study group, right? It was pretty interesting. The group that had 1 tablespoon vinegar daily had 2.6 pound loss over 12 weeks. So 3 months, 2 pounds, about 3 pounds lost. You're not much to write home about. The 2 tablespoon a day group lost 5 pounds over 12 weeks. So that's, pretty good. And of course, no surprise, the zero vinegar group actually gained weight, right? So that, as often happens when we unfortunately haven't figured out a good weight loss strategy, they gained weight. So I mean, just the fact that the guys on vinegar didn't, or the guys and gals on vinegar didn't gain weight should be good, but they also lost weight. 5 pounds over 3 months. Yeah, I mean, maybe not something again to write home about, but this is what's interesting. So the fat that was lost, right? Or I should say the weight that was lost was fat, right? And so this is really important, especially when it comes to diabetes health. When we look at weight loss regimen, when you're talking about like extreme calorie restrictions, or unfortunately, we're talking about the more popular weight loss drugs today, most of the weight that is lost, especially in the beginning, right, is actually muscle mass. That's not what you want to lose. You want to lose fat mass. Unfortunately, that's not what happens when you go to extreme calorie restrictions or some of these medications. But the fat that was lost in these studies was fat loss, fat mass. Okay, so if you're talking about 5 pounds, 2 pounds, that's significant. If that weight that is lost is coming from fat, right? All right. So when you look at and I hope, Betty, this is actually answering your question. I see your question. How long would you have to take it to before you see results? So these most of these studies are done for like 3 months or so. There aren't a lot of long-term studies, unfortunately, but 3 weeks, or sorry, 3 months of use. Having dropping an inch off your waist. I think it's something that's significant because that is signifying that the weight that you lost is coming from the dangerous visceral fat, what's called central adiposity. So we have fat all over our body. It's called subcutaneous fat. It's the stubborn fat under your, flabs of your skin that you don't like, that's unsightly, to you, but really doesn't pose any harm, or it's just, I guess, cosmetically maybe concerning. The more concerning fat is the fat that is in our central abdomen, right? That is the more concerning fat. And that's the fat that is lost when we first start to see and experience a drop in our waistline. So more important than your BMI, more important than your weight, your total body weight, is how much waist circumference, how much is lost from how many inches is lost around your waist. I hope that makes sense. And just again with a simple intervention, those who lost weight lost waist circumference. This was further studied. So what they did is said, okay, did they really lose the more dangerous visceral fat through this 3-week intervention? And yes, they did. You could see in this graph the placebo, not much difference, but those on the low dose versus those on the high dose, they both had significant drops in their central adiposity, okay, their visceral fat. And how they measured that was the CT scans. So they actually did CT scans before and after to examine the amount of fat that was lost. And they even, what's really nice about this image, you can see a square right there. I'm not sure if you can see that dark square. That's about a square inch amount of what's lost, right, of fat, from this one intervention. And what's nice is they controlled for exercise, they controlled for diet. So the diets in the three groups were the same. So that not one diet was eating more food. It wasn't like another diet, group were exercising more. Everything was as consistent as possible, so that they can tease out apple cider vinegar, or being the cause of their fat loss. Okay. Um, so you mean, because I on my first thing I would think is like, well, apple cider vinegar is nasty. I don't know if anyone's drinking. I don't care how much you dilute this stuff. To me, it tastes like vomit. Okay, like if I had to drink once or twice a day vinegar, I probably wouldn't eat that much, right? I probably would be a little nauseous. Probably maybe it was just tasted so nasty that they ate less, right? But that wasn't the case here. They ate the same amount of calories in each group, right? And still, the group that added just a simple intervention, apple cider vinegar, experienced weight loss, right? And again, I'm not sponsored by any apple cider vinegar companies, so I have no skin in this game. But it's really interesting when they see something so cheap and so effective, right? For your blood sugar and weight loss goals. So is that surprising to anybody? Let me know. Um, so that's what I think is really helpful to know, that it helps with weight loss. Now these are some final considerations when you're considering adding apple cider vinegar or any vinegar again, right? um, it can damage your teeth enamel. It also, if you're drinking it straight, can damage your esophagus. You don't want to do that. So you want to, number one, use a straw. whenever you're drinking. If you're choosing to drink it, dilute it also in 8 to 10 ounces of water. So make sure you're always diluting it. Pair it with a food. So, like we said, you don't have to have only apple cider vinegar. You could pair it with food. I like to make dressings, like so. I'll take apple cider vinegar and mix it with mustard. And mustard is a great, they're healthy condiment you can mix and pair with apple cider vinegar, and I'll throw it out in my dressing. Right. If you're not suffering from insulin resistance so much, right, and you could tolerate honey, you could actually put a little honey with that mustard. Now you got a nice honey mustard dressing, right? Tastes really good. If you don't want to go through the work, then get rice vinegar or balsamic vinegar, right? Vinaigrette. So get creative. There are other things or vinegars in the market that you can use to top your dressings, add on to your food. Potato salad, right? Now you're not only adding that vinegar to blood sugar spikes. When you eat potato salad, you're applying the heat and cool method we talked about before, where by heating and cooling a carb, you make more resistant starch so that you blunt the spike of blood sugar levels, right? So get creative, pair it with food, right? I think you're more likely to do something if it tastes good. So make it taste good. As far as amount, 1 to 2 tablespoons per day is probably enough, right? I'll cap it at 2 tablespoons a day, but you can see benefits as low as one, and consume it before a meal. So since obviously the hope for us as those who have diabetes is to blunt blood sugar spikes to improve the A1C, you want to make sure that you're pairing or eating it along with a high carb meal. So if you're having refined carbs, or high glycemic carbs, you want to, think of vinegar as a way to blunt the effect of those carbs in spiking your blood sugar levels, right? So that's all we got for tonight. All right. So I hope that answers any questions you might have on apple cider vinegar, blood sugar, and weight loss. Special, I guess, additions or bonuses. Apple cider vinegar has been beneficial for PCOS, which makes sense because those of us who have PCOS know it's insulin resistance disease, right? And there was a small study. I mean, nothing that we can say is a proven effect, but there was a study where they took 7 people who had PCOS, and 4 out of the 7, after just adding something simple like apple cider vinegar to their diets daily, saw a return of their monthly cycles. Their ovulation returned, right? So that's something that's significant, right? It's definitely worth knowing, right? If you have PCOS, and of course, the other benefits to think of are your cholesterol levels and your heart disease risk. It's some uh, Vinegar can actually dilate your blood vessels, make your arteries more elastic. Something we see because of its ability to increase nitric oxide, which basically helps dilute and keep our blood vessels nice, wide, and open. So another benefit of apple cider vinegar, along with its blood sugar lowering effect and its benefits for weight loss by amping AMPK. So that's all we got for tonight. A reminder again, if you guys haven't joined our membership, check the links in our bio section or the description section of the videos we've posted in the past to join us for January, where we junk the junk food. All right, that is the challenge for the first month of the year. I know it's gonna be a challenge for a lot of us, and to make it even sweeter, we got a cash prize for the winner. All right, so beloved, I pray above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. We won't be here next Monday, but so we'll start back in January. The next time you'll see us is January 5th, live on Monday at 7 p.m. I'll see you then.